Hey everybody, Tim Higgins here with A&I Solutions. We're going to talk about one of my favorite products by Broadcom called TDM. Now, TDM is Test Data Manager, but to me, this product does a lot more than just test data. It really is a Swiss Army knife of many different data sources or many different data tasks. Now, today we're going to talk about four of the main topics, or really three maybe. When you think of test data management, now you notice the word CA. It used to be CA Test Data Manager. Now it's Broadcom. So this may change in the future, but right now it is what it is. So when you think about test data management, there are a couple of topics you really try to cover, right? Number one is profiling. Just understanding and learning your data or your databases or your schemas, and TDM definitely can help you with that. The other one is generate data, which we will call make data, just to keep it simple. And the other thing is you want to do is you want to give the users the ability to find data, right? To me, this is like a massive where clause. And then, of course, there is the famous PII. We help you find PII, we as in TDM. And we also give you the ability with a very couple quick clicks to mask that PII data. And with TDM, there's actually a paradigm that goes behind management and how to do more release control of your masking of data. Now, the last thing is your virtual test data. This has to do with a appliance, and it also is a very long time consuming process. So we're not going to cover it in this demo, but if you do have any questions, please reach out to us. Now, with saying that, the first thing we want to do is we want to come in here, we want to make a project. Now, projects are arbitrary, so make them simple for you. Now, I've never seen a limit, but common sense is the more you have, the more resources the server is going to use. We'll call this demo data for Blazemeter. How's that? And I'll just put a Monday on this. You know what? No, I'll do it on my version. Because you have a name of your project, and in your project, you could have as many different versions as you want. For an example, I may want Sprint 1, right? For my developers, I may want to call it version 1. I may even just want to call it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right? Anything I want it to be. Right here, we'll just say, this is a demo project to be deleted. That way I know to go back and delete it later. Now, I can also put a max number of current jobs, which will help you with that resource thing. Now, TDM is not a massive resource hog. It really is about the data, right? So it could be on the database side. But with saying that, you'll understand as you go through this where that may be, and I'll try to point some of that out. So give it a second to load. Here it is. And now it's there. And if I just wanted kicks and giggles, just add another version, I could just do this, right? And then say save. Okay, and there's this feature called upgrade. We'll talk about that later, but I can upgrade my versions if I want to. Give us a few seconds to refresh, and I should see a Monday and a Tuesday. So we'll click on Monday, and I'm good with that one. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and close. I shouldn't have to refresh because we waited for the project to load. Sometimes you got to wait for this project to be created in the back end. Notice how it popped up, and then you can access it. So whenever you create your data, you want to make sure you have data profiles. Now, in this case, I already have some pre-made, but they're very simple to make. If I say new profile, then I would connect to a data source. And this data source, as you can see, could be mainframe. We have MySQL. I thought I saw a Mongo in there. That's the reason I stopped for a second. But there's many different data sources. And if you don't see the one here, like there was Sybase, if you don't see the one you're looking for, then, ask Broadcom. I'm pretty sure it exists, or we could do something with it. Now, we're going to focus on our MedSite dev, and that's not really that important right now, a source and a target. The concept of TDM is it has a source where you're coming from and a target where you're going to. Now, that's your default, and we can change that when we talk about publishing. There's other things that you can do in configuration I'm not going to cover in this video. Classifiers have to do with how you're doing your PII data, some of the rules. I may bring that up. I can connect to a dev test if I'm doing that. And of course, emails. The reason I'm bringing these up is because these are some of the issues that you're going to see as I give this demo, okay? For an example, there's a process in the deploying of PII I can't do because I don't have an email server. But let's go up here. The first thing I want to do is I want to create an environment. Now, we'll just call this dev, okay? Well, you know what? Let's start simple. We'll call it QA. And QA team needs test data for Blazemeter. Okay, fair enough. And now I'm going to add a data source. Now you can have many different data sources here. So this MedSite is just a website we're going to look at in a few minutes that I created as a demo. But I like it because it has PII data and stuff like that in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick our profile that we created over here, and I'm going to say save. And now what I'm going to do is, oh, did I pick Dev for that? I'm sorry, I was talking. I could pick QA as well. Yeah, okay, it's Dev. I just want to make sure that I'm picking the right one when I'm doing it. So we'll pick another one and we'll say Dev. And this is make data for developers. Okay, if I can spell developer, sorry. There we go. It's one of those things when I stop spelling, I kind of messed myself up. So here what I'm going to do is I'm just pick this one and I can add another one and hit save and we're good to go. So now I should have two environments, one QA, one dev. And of course I could create one of prod if I want to. But the next thing I'm going to do is create a model. Now the concept of a model is when you think about you have production data, okay, and then you have your QA data, and then you have your dev data. Don't think so much about your environment at this point of view. Think about the model of your use case. Okay, so in other words, my developers need to know a list of claims. Now, while saying that, I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to slide it over. This is a tool by JetBrains. It's a database tool. I just like it because I can do many queries at once. Now, I can do that with a thick client if I wanted to, the TDM thick client. But here, it's just easier to show because it's already open. I don't have to remote into the box or connect my thick client or anything like that. So let's go ahead and hit get started. It wants to know which environment. We're going to focus on QA first, and we're going to say next. Okay. Now here I can include tables. I can exclude tables. If you have a massive database, which most companies do, then you probably only want to focus on certain databases. For an example, let me look here. I'll bring it over so you can see what I'm doing. In my source, okay, so dev doesn't have, and prod I have two extra tables that I don't have in dev. And usually what I do is I just exclude those. It doesn't really do anything to my point because my tables are so small. But if you're doing a massive database, think about what this model, I'm going to go ahead and say next. So while this is running, I can keep talking. You kind of want that model to be around your use case because you don't want to go in there and you don't want to scan and try to discover every single table if you know they're not going to be used. Now to reverse that, you could and take some away, run it again and remove some, or you could just leave it. The problem is this could take time. Okay. I did this with a client that took about a half a day, but then again, I did it with other clients where it took about 15 minutes. So number one, this is not running on a massive server. Okay. So there's not a lot of CPU and not a lot of memory. So it's not as fast as it would be in your environment. But if you notice, we did three databases and it kind of, not three databases, I'm sorry, three tables from one database, and it kind of went pretty quick. The big thing is, and I keep talking about resources, TDM is really not that much of a resource hog because it's really just running queries in the back end. Okay, so, but you do want to make sure you meet Broadcom's recommended requirements. Okay, so don't let that kind of scare you. Now, and most of the time, to be honest with you, I run a lot of this on my laptop, but that's not recommended because you want it in a corporate environment, right? So with that, you want it on the proper machines. So we're going to look at claims. Now, I know there's a link between claims and adjusters. Now, you remember that whole profiling? This is part of the profiling. So if I click on here and I say, you know what, let's create a relationship because I don't have any. What I want to do is pick this one because I had it highlighted. And then the column in here I want is a name. I'm kind of cheating because I know how this works. And I'm going to go to claims. And in claims, I want that to link to my adjuster. Okay. Now that is good. On the thick client, there's actually more tools to help you fix this. Now, when you think the maturity of an application, TDM really is on that, the Porto TDM is really on that verge of being an adult, right? It technically is an adult because you think about adolescence, preteen, teen, and adult and all that. But the thick client has a lot of other tools that couldn't be brought over into the portal. Now, it may in the future, and they're also a relative to the database. So in other words, if you're picking Oracle, you're going to have more options than you would if you picked, SQL. Or you may or may not, but you may have different options because the queries that runs in the background are different. For an example, you have database compare, you have schema compare, you have table compare, right? Which table and database is about the same. Then you have other things as well. So I could tell TDM to link all my tables that have a matching suffix, right? So if I had an environment where it was like DEV_cars, for an example, and I want all my dev tables to be linked together, then I could do that. By default, it's looking at primary keys and foreign keys, okay? Now, another way I can do this, if I click on this one, I can say here, edit relationships. It's the exact same thing. So what we're going to pick name. Here I'm going to pick claims. And then here, this is right here. So this is actually linking these three tables together, but based off of the name. Okay. And that's part of what keeps your relationships together. So if I click on this one, I can see I have a really good relationship between these two tables. Now, I can create an alias for this because remember, this is my personal model. Okay, I may not want these relationships in a different model. Okay, and that's really cool because I can bring in Oracle, I can bring in SQL, I can bring in flat files, and I can link them together. Let's say if I have a third-party tool or a third-party company that I'm pulling, data files from, then I can link those here and just make it a pseudo link without actually touching anything that is live or production, and that's really, really, really useful. Now, let's go ahead, ignore this stuff says PII scan and stuff because we can do that later. There are other things here like a heat map. You look at the heat map to do your PII data, but we're going to look at that when we talk about PII. But now that I have this model, you're like, Tim, what can I do with this? Okay, let's try something. So this is find and reserve. Do you remember that where, massive where clause? So this is QA. QA needs claims. This is that special claims person. So most of the times when QA is doing testing, I wouldn't say most times, a lot of times, especially in the older days, they would always have that special test data that they knew was always correct, right? So they would always use it. So what if that's the case here? I can say next. And it wants to know which environment, so we'll say this is QA. Now what we'll do is we'll put claims, and I'm going to keep this simple. So we're just going to allow them to pull back the claims ID, maybe the claimant name, and the case type, and maybe just the status. Okay, maybe I want to get a list, and doctors. Maybe I want to get a list of doctors who are assigned to this name, and make sure. I don't know. We'll just kind of play with it. I was trying to think of a good use case, but on the fly, I don't have one. So we're just going to call this. We'll put a space here. Okay, claims. We'll allow them to search for it. On the claimant name, we're just going to call this. The claimant. Okay, there we go. And we'll allow, we're not going to allow them to search for that, but we'll allow them to search for type, or we'll just call it case. Okay, and then we'll allow them to search for status, but we won't allow them to search for the doctor. Okay, I said doctor and nurse, but I created the data. You're going to see me create the data again in a few minutes. So I know it's just kind of generically doctor right now. So what we've done, we've created a model to allow our QA team to go in there and search for their own data. Okay. So that's very important because how many times does QA team call up the database team and say, hey, we need fresh data. We need to refresh our data and do more testing. All right. So if I had a tester, which I don't, I can turn this on and log in as a tester, and then they can see it in their test group. And you'll see that shortly. I don't think I have a user called tester, but maybe I do. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to come down here and see how this works. And then we'll come back up and look at the second part because right now we're focused on a user being able to request data. Now, the reason I'm scrolling through this is because you can lock this down based off permissions where when a tester logs in, the only thing they would see is their information. So the self-service catalog is a page that allows people to see and do actions. For an example, request data or make data, or in this case, claims for QA. They're going to click on a request. And I kind of should have looked at some stuff before I did this, but that's okay because I don't really know any data over here. So what we can do is we can say a claims ID that is greater than 10. Okay. And then what we can search for, let's see if we have a T in here. Sometimes it takes a few seconds because it has to hit the data and refresh and come back. I don't think we do. We got a Richie. It looks. Oh wait, this when you look at. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so let's try this. Okay, if I could do it. There we go. Sorry, my click. And notice this says show related tables. So if I had the links of the tables, it would show that data as well. And in this case, I have anything. Oh, I'm sorry. I said greater than 10. Well, that's okay. But you get how it works. And I can say less. Now, let's say if I wanted to find a status of boss. Oh, I'm sorry. Status should be open or closed. That's doctor. My bad. I have a doctor named boss. Okay, there we go. Now find data. Now notice it has an error because sometimes it has to go off like this and pull the data back, and it allows me to select it. And then you can have multiples, which is really cool. Now in this case, I'm only going to do close. But I could have open, I can have Tim, I can have whatever. But the point is the user is actually pulling this data back for themselves. And I like this data group, so I'm going to add this, and I'm going to give it a name. Whoops, it went away. Oh well, it's there. So the point is I can rename it. I can say when this data expires, and you'll see what that means shortly. So what I'm going to say is go ahead and, you know what, I want it to expire. And I want it to expire tomorrow. And I'm going to go ahead and reserve this. Now, what that means is reserve is imagine if your QA manager came in here and created this data for you, then you would log in and only see this. And what this does is this allows you, give it a few seconds because it's actually creating. There it goes. What this allows you to do, oops, maybe I shouldn't say it all. But it allows you now to request and get that fresh data based off of that query. You don't have to build that query every time. So imagine if your team, here it is. Imagine if your team always runs this test, then you don't want your team going there every day and just requesting this fresh data. And I'll give it a second because I clicked on it. And now if I say, I can say show related tables, and then I'm going to download. Now, the idea is showing related tables if we did a join, but I didn't do it. I just kept it simple. Now here, if I click on this, here's the list of data for testing. Pretty cool, huh? Now, that is to find data. Now, if you look at the thick client has a huge subsetting tool that you could use if you needed to go beyond what this UI gives you. But the UI is very simple to use. And not only is it very simple to use, it has a very massively well-built engine in the back end that's doing the work for you. It also allows you to lock it down to have that policy control within your company of how people are gathering data. Right. So I had a medical company, I also dealt with a banking company, and they just didn't want people in there running queries and pulling data and, just get information because some of it is risky. Some of it is PII. And we're going to look at that in a few seconds. So it's saying that's fine data. But now we're going to put our different hats on, and now we're going to be developers. Now, with the developer, I'm going to change a project because I've already done the work for you on that one. If I go down to, I apologize, I probably should have looked at it or saved it. So it's not this one. Let's pretend I had to do a blaze meter. Here we go. I think it's this one. Maybe not. All right, so let's try this one. See, I need to clean up my projects, right? So it's this one. All right, now we're going to change our hats, and we're going to go and take this data right here. And the reason I like this tool is because I can do this. Whoops, sorry, I hit the mic. It probably was a big boom on your side. If not, then we're good. And then I can just say select all, and just like that, yes, I'm positive. I want to execute this. And now if I go back to here, say I can hit Control Z and get back to all those, run it again. Oh, it's in the process of doing it. So, oh, nope, I have to do this. There we go. Now we have no data. Now that's cool because this is my dev environment. So let's go make some. Now with the generators, the only thing I did was I create a model. From your model, you're going to create objects. Now with these objects, it recognizes, some of them are pretty simple. So if I say register new object, I can pick from a WSDL, right? XSD, XML, or request response pair. For an example, if you're doing TDM test or something along that, JSON file. Most of your I keep wanting to say MongoDB, but most of your big data is really around JSON files, right? I can pick a table, a delimited CSV. Now, if I pick table, it knows the profile. For an example, I can do this, and I know this is DBO, and now I can see my tables, but we pick the ones we want. Okay, so while this is running, I probably should, there we go. So I can't cancel because I've already picked those. But that's how you pick your objects. Now, the reason I'm showing this is because what if I have objects coming from different tables? What if I have some coming from Oracle? What if I have some coming from SQL? Pretty cool, huh? Now, what I'm going to do here is once we do that, we can say create generator. Now, I already did this for you because to me, this is one of the strongest tools of TDM. I'm going to add these tables to my whiteboard over here. Okay, these are the ones we picked. Notice they have a deploy order or a publish order, if you will. So let me go ahead and click these. They also say used. Yes, that's if I brought in some that didn't have formulas in them. And we're going to look at that in a few seconds. So one of the strongest points, in my opinion, in a database tool is to generate realistic synthetic data. A lot of times I come to a customer and we look at their production data and we compare that of how we're going to create non-production data. Okay, so for an example, what if I need to link tables? Remember, this is the service ID. What are we looking at? So adjuster and claims. So if I looked at claims, I said, well, my claims name, my claimant name should match this name. And that's how we link that there. Okay, notice these little @ signs. To me, that is almost like a regex, if you will, but it's not regex. For an example, this is a name, and if I click on it, and if I say, show me this paintbrush, we call this tool the data painter. Now, the data painter can be very, very, let me save this so we don't lose it. You can have some massive data or formulas right here in the screen. For an example, remember when I said we can link to other tables? If I know that this was coming from this other table, that's all I've got to do. We have built-in variables for you, including date and time. You'll see that in a few minutes. Next, which would be your next number in order, which is great for those numbers that have to go one after another. The other thing we have is a list of functions. This is numeric, what you'd basically expect, min, min, max, whoa, I totally said that wrong. Minimum, max, that kind of stuff, right? So if you come on down, we have date and time. We have a lot of functions for date and time. I can pick one over here, and then I can pick I'm looking for this birthday, so DOB. I can say that the minimum age is 18, the max age is 68. Let's say we're dealing with, maybe insurance, and then add today's date. That will give me a very realistic date within that range. That's important if your developer is trying to add new features or if they're running tests to see if that person qualifies, right? So it's very, very good on how it handles all these dates and stuff. Again, I can minus dates. A good thing is, like, if I pick the hard date, I can pick today's date and minus 11 years on it, and that would be the date I started A&I Solutions. I'm using that theoretically. Today's not my anniversary, but still. Control is if, ands, buts, and I think I got an example of that, so I'll show you that in a few minutes, but it's what you expect. String values, the same thing. If you've ever done any kind of programming or development, I can do length of the string, I'll make them all lowercase, make them all uppercase. If you saw that there was JDate, I think it's date, yeah, there's a lot of JavaScript parsing because there's a lot of, today we use more REST calls, which handles a lot of JSON. And it's really cumbersome to get these JSON dates into regular dates, but this does it for you. Let's scroll on down because code is things like a GUID ID. There's SSNs, right? So we can put SSNs in there. There's a USSN separator by, in our case, it would be a minus. List of values is what I want to get to. You also have what we call, oops, I guess I had it open too long because I moved away, it shot away. We have what we call this random list of values. You'll see it's like love. Let me give you a second. With it, you have a seedless table that you can maintain. Now, in this case, we have a hash value. We have, this is a connection to a SQL where I'm pulling back a row. Now, if I wanted to do, let me get the seed list. Here it is. Now I have this list of values that I could use. So car parts. And it's really that simple. Now I didn't want that. Hopefully I didn't. Okay, it looks like I didn't save it. But notice here you have the US SSN with a minus. Here's our date of birth between 18 and 65. I thought here's just a list. So if I had just a list, oops. Now those are shortcuts. I'll talk about those in a few seconds. But let's say if I had a list of just military life. Remember, we look at your production data and we try to get it closed. Here's the seed date. That's your published date. Here's an if. So here in this one, I'm saying if the seed list value first name equals Tim, then write Tim Higgins, me, in this column. If not, then use this name that comes out of this field. Now I know there's no Tim Higgins is in there. So every time it's going to pull the name out of here. The other thing you want to look at too, I get asked all the time about customers is how do you keep this data linked? It's really that simple. Okay. I register the table so TDM knows that it's there. And then I can link between them. Again, here's a random digits between 5 and 6 characters. Anyway, so I think that's about it, but there's a lot of functionality. Let's talk about these shortcuts real quick. If I know the function that I want, I can just do here and start typing it in. So I can do seed list. Oh, I know the other thing I was going to say is if you were doing SQL Server, or not SQL Server, but if you're doing, let me scroll down, see if it's down here. Yeah, SQL commands, I can pull from a store procedure, which is very common. So if I need one that's really, really complicated, I can write it in store procedure, right, and pull it and make it faster. I did that sometimes when I'm doing a lookup ID, just because it's quicker. But think about this too. I can connect to a data source. So let's say I want to grab a username from another table that's not even registered. That's pretty cool. Anyway, so with saying that, let's talk about what we can do with it. We're going to say publish. Now here, I've got my 3. I got my table counts. And I'm going to go ahead and publish to my dev. Now I can publish to a file if I want. A lot of times with customers, I'll publish to a file, if nothing else, just for testing, right? So let's go back to connection here. Okay, so that's my profile that I want to publish to, DBO. And I just want 15. Now down here, if I hit duplicates, just update the value because this is just test data and just go ahead and ignore there. And let's just go ahead and publish. So while that's running, it's running in the background. So if I go down here and look, and we're going to look at our submitted requests. And if I go to generators, I'll see one that's here that's running. Okay. Now we'll give it a second. Now it's on a refresh, but every now and then you can force it to refresh. It's really not that much data, so it shouldn't take that long. But the concept, oh, see, now it's done. So if I click on this, this is going to give me my logs to let me know what kind of happened. Now, it looks like this, so I can come to here. If there's an error or whatever I can see, but I can see 15 rows were inserted. 15 rows were inserted. There's a few more features you can get from the Thick client, like you can publish to a SOAP UI. You can also publish straight JSON files and things like that. I think you can on the portal too. I think I saw it in the dropdown. But anyway, there's more features that are coming over. So if you don't have something here that you need, trust me, it's there. But what we were doing, let's go look here. Now, if I just select all 3 of these again, and if I just say go, now I have 15 rows of data. But more importantly, if I look at the name, right? Last name Lion, pretty cool. Go over here, there's Lion. If I go over here and look at my adjuster, this name, then I have very realistic data that is still related to each other and connected to each other. Now, with saying that, let's do one last thing, and then we'll wrap this up. What we're going to do is look at PII. Now, with PII, you do the same thing. We're going to pick our environment, okay? And well, in our case, environment is dev. Here I can pick a profile. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just pick the profile. That's important because it doesn't have to be an environment. But what if I want to do all of dev? What if I do all of QA, right? Now, classifiers are kind of like rules that you pick. These are your default rules. You'll get these. For USA, it's like social security number, first name, last name, but you can modify these, okay? Some person like me would help you do that. And then here we're going to say what level you're going to scan. and then it would, scan through here and let me know if it finds any PII data. Now, if I hit scan, it's going, because I just want you to see what this looks like, and then we're going to go and actually look at one that's already complete, just because this takes a little time. Now, while this is scanning, again, we get an ID. It's scanning through, and what it's doing is it's looking through our pseudo model that we created. Okay, let's give it a second. I don't really want to hit refresh here, so let's just click on it. There we go, 3 tables, 22. Notice it's in progress. It's flying through it pretty quickly, and it looks like it's almost done. Okay, so we got 22 columns. All right, that should be about done. There it goes, ready for review. Now, if you remember, the reason I'm doing this is because there's a paradigm of how you would do this. Now we're going to go review it. Notice this is yellow. Well, if I click on this, I can see my columns and say, you know what, that's not a state, but not PII data. What this is doing is tagging these to be masked. Okay. For an example, date of birth. I can tag this one as date of birth. This is PII. Whoops. Whoop. My copy and paste, I hit the wrong key. PII. Here we go. And just like that, it's tagging that one for us. Now, once this is done, we'll confirm and close. We could go through all these and do that. Now, after that, it's going to go to a sign off. The sign off then gets downloaded. Notice I don't have a reviewer to send this email to. That's what I'm saying. We don't have an Exchange server here connected. So this would send to a reviewer who would come in and look at all this and say, yes, I approve, or hey, you know what, Tim, you didn't do anyway. See, it found some tags for us, but let's say you didn't do this date, so we got to go back and retag it. Okay, once all that's done, then it goes to reports that allows people to come in and look at it. The next step we would do is look at the masking part of that. Okay, so if we say go, and notice it already has our model of what we created. For an example, if I look at this one, it has 3. It knows there's a name. It knows there's a name. Now, this is name, but I can pick other things that I want for it than just name. Okay. What I mean by name is what data do I want in the place of this? Do you remember the whole data painter and all that? It uses that here, okay, as well. So if I wanted to, I could pick a hash date of birth, right? If it's a date of birth thing. This is a set of options. And I said we were going to look when it was already created, but we're just going to create one. It doesn't take that long. This is a set of really in-depth settings that you can set. For an example, if I want my date and time to be a certain thing, if I want to go by an order number, if I want to use long dates, if I want to do 1,000 rows at a time and then continue, if I want auditing, right? So there's a really, really good set of settings that you can set on your masking. So now the next thing it's going to say is, well, what do you want to mask? So let's do all the columns. I'm doing the dev environment. Exclude tables marked not PII, so it's just going to skip them. We want to do the whole environment or maybe just part of it, right? And then we can preview when it's done, but and we have an audit. So let's just go ahead and say next. And this is just saying, do you want to do this now? I can download the config file to modify it later. That's pretty cool. We have this thing called a fast data maker that actually runs in the background. So I can download this, bring it to the fast data maker and modify it if I want to. Okay, which this is all the stuff I need for it. Okay, so if we keep going, here's the masking information here. And I can physically run it as a batch file if I wanted to. I can do it later. I can schedule this to run at midnight. So let's just go ahead and just say mask. Yes, I confirm, because it's saying, hey, you're about to do something bad. You sure you want to? And just like that, we have started to mask our PII. Now, while this is running, I'm going to just kind of recap without clicking through it. We created an environment. We created our pseudo model. We allowed the QA team to set up queries that they're going to do themselves. Oh, and just like that, it's done masking. So let's look at this. Then we'll go back and just review with clicking. So if I click on this, this tells me this is the config file of the mask. Okay. This goes into an audit because I said I wanted to see what happened. Now, I didn't say give me a full audit, so this is just kind of a high level. But this column is using a hash love. Remember that whole LOV? It stands for list of values. So it's using a list of values there. Our date of birth is right here. Okay. So this tells us the rule that it used, the column and the table. Of course, the schema, I'm using a SQL database, so everything's DBO unless I say otherwise. And then, of course, here's your database instance and the server and the profile. So it's all there. I can reference this if I need to in the past, in the future, not the past, we haven't created yet. And here's a list of truly what happened. Now, if I go look at the data, let me put my, what do they call it? Not put my foot in my mouth. That'd be the opposite thing. Well, let me prove my point. If I look at the adjuster and we just select here, the only thing we really changed, I think, was the name. And if I just run this one, notice the name changed. Okay, so let's go here and let me go pull it up. Okay, it's Mr. Lion or Mrs. Lion. And we run it and we lost our lion. Now we have a name. And then if I do the same for claims, oh no, I've lost claims. So unfortunately, you will not see the refresh of claims because it looks like I didn't save that tab. But I promise you, if I run this, if I can select it and run it, now you have a list of data that not only still matches where it came from, right? But it also is now not PII data. And it really was that simple, right? It took maybe 15 minutes to do all that. So not the whole thing, just the PII and the masking. Now, of course, you're going to spend more time in yours and you want to take the time to get everything right. But again, here, if I look at my environment, we create environments. I deleted one, so just removed it just to make it simple, keep everything on one page. But from there, we created a data model, which is here. This one. We created our data model. And if you notice, it had the paperclip, which means I could have multiple of those with multiple models, right? Not just one. And in this model, I can come in here and click, and I can see the relationships, right? So I have these relationships with these other tables. We allow QA, our testers, to create their own queries. Whoops, I don't want to make that change. Yes. And we also created objects from tables that we registered from our model, right? Or we can register others if we wanted to. And then with those, we talked about the data painter, how powerful it is to create our formulas for our data generation. Because we deleted data, we regenerated them. A couple of things I didn't talk about is actions. If I need something to happen before my publish, then I can put that here I can do it before publish our table. And then with this, I can do a Javelin file, which is something that we'll talk about later. It's a workflow. I can run a script if I need to. So there's things I can do that can happen before the publish, and I can also do things that happen after the publish. So, and that's really cool. So if I need to clean out a table, or if I need to look up an ID, okay, there's also ways of when you do your publish, there's also ways of saying, let me do a publish here. There's a lot of hitting things that TDM does really strong that most people don't know. For an example, if I need to keep this type of data in some sort of memory, it can do that for me as well. For an example, if I go to an XML file, and notice it says, do I want to publish in multiple files? Do you publish here? And just like this, I'm creating a list of XML data. I can create a list of JSON data. And the good news is, if I need fresh data every time, then I can do that every time. We can also create what's called variables. Okay, variables are obviously what they say they are. And you do that right here. We can have global or local variables. These are all global. Well, this one's all global. That's very common. If I needed to change environment, then I can just change it in the variable and not have to rewrite anything, right? So we talked about data masking, how easy it is, PII data, how easy it is, but the paradigm that gives you control, right? So people aren't just doing it for fun. Again, the generators are here. And then I can copy this generator and rename it if I wanted to. And then, the other thing I want to talk about is if I come down to here, and then we'll let you go. My self-service catalog, again, if I'm the developer or if I'm the QA, I may not give them permission to anything besides what's inside my self-service catalog or their self-service catalog. And that allows them to come in and rerun this information without having to call you, giving they got permission. Now, this is coming from other environments, but I kind of just wanted to pull it here. If I need to generate data, I can click on this and then notice it just popped up right away and I can produce it. Sorry, that's another find, but I don't think I saved it. There was a checkbox on this that says save to self-service. I didn't save it to self-service, but you would as your generator, and then it should show up here. But let's say if I come in here and say generate bikes. Now this is for another project. I can click on this, and just like that, I can get a fresh set of data inside my tables every time. You always have those developers that come in there and they mess up the data, or they want to, well, they don't really mess it up. They really do their work, and their work changes the data. But with saying that, you want to come in there and let's just prove it. I don't have an email. Well, I do have an email, but it's kind of pointless. But with saying that, just like that, 2 buttons, and I'm already creating fresh data for my developers. Okay. Now, hopefully all this makes sense. If you have any questions, believe me, there's so much more to this tool than what I'm showing you. But if you do have any questions, please reach out to us. We're definitely here to help. And hopefully this did show you the power of TDM, everything you can do with it. And believe me, there's a lot more than what I've showed you here.